So I don't know if it's going to be good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to anyone who's decided to click on a button and listen to this. The first mistake. But I guess that if you are, this pilot episode for a potential podcast, if you like, emerged from you and I having discussions, probably too many, about really what comes down to any sort of moral and ethical implications coming out of new technologies, if that's a kind of tagline for it. Yeah. So we talked about things like data, AI, algorithms, things like that. And what I was really interested in, when you get quite excited and talk about these things, themes and concepts related to what I do would suddenly appear in my head. So AI is an obvious one about consciousness, awareness, human rights, algorithms, who owns the data, social contracts. Well, do I own the data because I use it? This is the platform I'm doing it. So really all these ethical questions coming out of the creation of these new technologies. And the reason that I was always interested in what you were talking about was because of my job. So for those who don't know me, my name's Simon, and I am a political philosopher. I did my doctorate in kind of theories of power and social contract theories. I'm also quite interested in intersectionality, and I teach courses about that at Montfort University in Leicester. And I generally do a lot of research on homelessness and public space, and all those kind of big moral questions that come around that. And of course, you were talking about all these technological innovations because of your background.
So I did a doctorate in modeling high-powered lasers, and did some research around that. That really got me into computers, and it was towards the end of that I learned about the wonderful world of machine learning, and from there decided to be a data scientist. I've been a director in an IT services consultancy for the last year and a bit, and it's really fascinating talking to Simon because I am submerged in the technology, and it's really, really hard to understand what is possible. And I'm a big fan of the art of the possible and those kind of discussions because I read about the research and things like that. And you hear a lot about the sort of the dark side and the moral implications and things like that. And it fascinates me because I'm not trained to think those kind of arguments all the way through. I've not spent enough time really delving deep enough. So it's easier for me to just prod Simon and find out what his thoughts are and help me come to some conclusions or ask better questions of what things are. And like I said before we started, there's a bit of a risk with this in that Simon and I are both very excitable individuals and we're very good at losing the thread as well. So this could end up rambling a little bit, but hopefully it will be entertaining. I'd love it if you learn something, and we'll get to a point where we can do more of these. We might find some interesting stuff to talk about. It's about what kind of questions can we answer or ask better than we have been before about the stuff that's being done around the world and the stuff that might be being done or what is even right to pursue and things like that, and how it affects the kind of current climate as well, because we're living in really unusual times.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because what you've just said has made me think of this whole sort of Silicon Valley ideology of disruption. Technology causing disruption into societies is a positive thing to sort of force and shift changes. And I guess in some ways, I'm kind of coming from the opposite side of that, of a suspicion and flipping that on its head. Mm-hmm. Well, what about the moral questions and the ethical questions that will disrupt the disruption, effectively, will disrupt the kind of pushing and steaming ahead with these technologies? And I guess overall, bottom line is, for me, technological advancements have always happened faster than the moral and ethical questions that need to be asked around those technologies. So it's interesting you say that you talk to me about that, because I also, I guess, I'm guilty of kind of falling into that. It's evil and it's going to kill us, right? And that, so it's good to have you here to correct me. Go, no, Simon, Skynet is not going to happen, etc., etc. So I guess with that and this whole idea of rambling, let's tie down a kind of opening discussion, right, and talk about. I guess maybe it's a bit cheesy to talk about it as an opening kind of shot, but let's talk about AI.
Yeah, well, I was keen to cut you off a little bit, but I know that's probably bad form with their first ever pilot podcast, so I'll hold off. But talking about the nature of disruption and Silicon Valley and things like that. And
Right.
now, if this becomes a regular thing, I might do a lot of this where I'll quote something I can't remember the source from, so I'll have to go back and sort of paste that in. But someone wants to find wealth as the kind of ability to do more, and said that, well, actually, improvements in technology, like if technology becomes better, someone invents something new, everyone becomes wealthier, because all of it, if something's more efficient or it's cheaper to do something, actually everyone can now do it. You take the mobile phone now, with the invention of the mobile phone, now everyone has the ability to communicate wirelessly. And the truth of it is, okay, not everyone can afford that, and it's not accessible to everyone, but that has been made a possibility. And so the idea of wealth being this enabler to do more with what you have, means that actually technology makes everyone wealthier. So I quite like that as a reason, as a driving force for that disruption. How can we change things? So I can kind of see why things have gone that way. And the other major reason, the real reason, is that if there's an economic advantage to be had, someone will go and get it, and that's it.
Yeah. So I guess one of the issues we're going to have too is that I'm a bit of a typical political philosopher in the sort of vein of Socrates, right? So I'm going to ask you to define things constantly, and because you're going to use terms that are going to make me go, okay, well, what does wealth really mean, sort of? And that's quite a big question, because we'd have to talk about, well, are we talking about money? You've talked about phones, so I guess that means being able to connect to people better is wealth. But we do know that there are some kind of mental health problems around kind of mobile phones and things like that. But I just want to put that aside for just a brief moment and kind of sort of say these kind of, I guess, the opposite of what you've said. So I'm not entrenched, for a start. I love changing my mind. I think that's the exciting moment to happen. But I am very suspicious of the narrative that technology will solve the political problems that we have, because we have technology to solve political problems today. And we don't. And I guess to sort of throw back a reference at you, there's a very famous line from Marx that capitalism doesn't solve its problems, it just moves them around, right? So yes, phones and things have made us wealthier and stuff like that, but at the expense of what? We know how these things are made. We don't necessarily treat people within our own nations like that anymore, in these kind of places where these things are produced, but we definitely do exploit a workforce in other places, kind of thing. So that is kind of also a big sort of, I guess that still kind of describes our perspectives. So I think it's important that we actually then, having set that out, that we kind of going to be challenging each other in this way.
Yeah.
Let's kind of focus on a big sort of topic, if you like, a kind of about these kind of new technologies, because they do bring up all these questions. So you have, I know that AI gets you really excited, and I know that that's because I don't really know what to call them anymore. Like, they programs, sometimes people say AI, but they really mean automated workforces. Yeah. So I guess maybe talking about an automated workforce and the implications of that is a good starting point.
So it's an interesting one, and I gripe about it quite a bit. And it's quite common, actually, for people that work in data science or work with what gets called AI, in that most of us hate the term AI, artificial intelligence. Right. I don't know, because it's really hard to define, and it kind of encompasses a lot of stuff. A lot of people, when they say it, they kind of just mean machine learning models or stuff that's been done with machine learning. But sells newspapers, doesn't it? And sells adverts putting AI on stuff, and everyone gets really excited about Skynet and all that good stuff. But the whole idea of automating a workforce, that doesn't necessarily have to be any kind of AI or machine learning. That you can very easily do, especially information workers' jobs. You can do a lot of it by just setting up the right tools. And that's how I do a lot of my talks to the data science community and to organizations that are looking to sort of take their steps around this, and say that, you can achieve a lot with it, but it's probably less risk and more valuable for you to explore the foundational stuff. Like your data storage is probably a disaster. You're probably running your business out of Excel and things like that. So like if someone, and I've seen cases of this where there's people's full-time job is copy and pasting stuff out of Excel into other Excel spreadsheets, typing stuff out of PDFs.
That's not anyone we know, is it? Who might be listening to this? I mean,
no. There was it was someone that we'd worked with, and they had a database that exported to a PDF. Someone downloaded that, typed the numbers from the PDF into a spreadsheet, and loaded that up to another database. And we just connected the two databases up, and that was that person. And this is a really interesting one, and one of the ones I really want to talk to you about. Yeah, that was like 4 days a week of that person's job. We automated away.
Yeah.
Now, and people always get upset about the automation of people's jobs and things like that. But like, does that person want to be typing numbers into a spreadsheet for 30 hours a week? Is that shouldn't we be getting rid of jobs like that?
So is that kind of like, is that what you think is should be the starting point to any kind of workforce automation? Is the ethic, if you like, is to take away jobs that are basically just crap and soul destroying.
The menial, going from the menial to the meaningful, is like a soundbite I use quite a bit.
Oh, yes, that's tasty.
So I was on a panel with a guy called Craig Patterson from the Data Lab. He runs the executive education team. He's really, really good. Also a very good speaker around this sort of stuff. And we got asked this question, and his answer was brilliant. So I'm just going to steal it, Craig. It talks about how he said jobs are made up of tasks. And actually what we can do is we automate away tasks. That doesn't necessarily mean we've automated the job. We just have to find other tasks to put into that job. And I think that's a really, really good way to look at it. Like that person that was typing numbers into a spreadsheet 30 hours a week, they're not getting rid of that person. That person's now there to use her higher level skill set, her sort of the higher functions of her brain to go and do meaningful stuff and progress along her career instead of being bogged down in the menial.
So I kind of feel like there's a couple of things to say about that, which is quite interesting, and some of them quite challenging. I guess, well, let's start with the most challenging one, because you've sort of idealized that situation, right? You've idealized the worker in that case. We have to kind of maybe entertain the notion that some people aren't actually given the right situations or conditions to become capable at those, you said advancing their career, but what about those who just don't have those skills, like who are, workers who've worked in menial tasks and things like that? So you've got the technological kind of solution of some work's rubbish, so we can get rid of that, but then you've got the immediate political problem of what spaces are you going to open up if someone can't actually do anything else.
So I'm a big believer in all for it, automate away everything, let's go for it, and let's get to a place where no one has to work. And I think that's the important sort of stress, the word has to. But first of all, I don't think we'll ever get there.
Okay.
And I think it's more about, at the same time, to make that achievable, we have to massively raise the safety net to the similar kinds of levels or above where those people currently are. Because if we're creating more wealth, then surely those people should benefit from that extra wealth, not just the people with the kind of means of production or whatever, those that have the ability to automate away the entire company and keep all the money for themselves. So that's where I think it breaks down. And I don't have the answers. Yeah, that's why you're here.
Yeah, I'm sort of quite aware of the fact that this just sounds like you're giving some information about technology and I'm just attacking it. I don't think
that's good though.
I think we'll kind of end up flipping it as well at some point, because obviously there's demands that technology can make of principles and ethics and things like that. So we can talk about the fact that there's always been a sort of moralization around work, so even to the point where, in the sort of kind of 17th, 18th century, you've got work becoming seen as a civic duty, kind of coinciding with industrialization. This leads into a whole different field of political theory called biopolitics, but it's kind of bottom line is just when the state becomes interested and invested in controlling your body through your mind and keeping your body fit and working and productive unit for society, all those kind of things. So I feel like there's things that we're heading towards here. It feels like you sort of want to just say universal basic income, but you haven't. But that's what you want. That's what you want to say. And the second thing for me that's really interesting about that is because we've got this real hangover of this moralization of work. Of course, things have changed slightly, and you can see how it's shifted away from that in many aspects, that we sort of kind of hero worship people that have managed to get rich and don't have to work, or all those kind of things. But we definitely still have this permeating around. I think that's why people still turn around and, you know, have such a kind of acerbic negative reaction to welfare or the homeless. They see this kind of shit. Oh, I have to work. Well, you know, these people aren't working. So how do we deal with that then? So if we're going to have universal basic income and you want to automate everything, are there going to be some kind of psychological implications of, is it going to take a generation to kind of wash away this idea that we have value in our work?
I think. But even like you talk about the people that look down on those that aren't working, but actually you get gradations of work as well. Like, take like the demonization of like a social media influencer, right?
Yeah.
These people that make millions recording videos and content for social media, and people just like have a go at them and are really nasty about them because it's not proper work. And it's like, well, define proper work. I don't think that's, for me, it's that. I think that if you were to automate away everything, and again, this is like a utopia, I don't think it's achievable, especially not in any meaningful time frame, sort of. But I think you kind of have to give people that ability to do more.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the reason I don't say universal basic income is because, frankly, I don't know enough about it. I've read the stuff I've read. It sounds really interesting. It looks like something that I think I believe in, but I haven't researched it well enough. I feel like furlough and the whole furlough scheme during the current coronavirus outbreak has been really interesting as an analogy to that. Like we've kind of gone to this place where, actually that something's happened and people can't work, but the economy still needs to run and people still need to live. And okay, let's go to this idea where the government just pays everyone their salary. And I understand that's not a permanent solution because I don't think we can afford it, but it's interesting that has been something that is being done. And there's a whole host of things that's sort of swept up and sort of kicked up for discussion, especially around, so there's people I know that have been through it and really struggled with it. There's people that love it.
Yeah, because that's really interesting. Because one of the things that, so I mean, I quit my job when I was about 30. As well, you know, I had this illustrious career as a famous rock star. Just the rest of the world didn't notice.
Were you in the
band? If you see an inactive website, I'll drop it. But and I sort of did my masters when I was 31, I think. Well, I finished it when I started my PhD when I was 31, right? So I was quite late to the game. And I did find that a couple of things that you've said there. First of all, I found that I sort of felt a bit guilty sometimes by saying, I've done loads of work today. I've worked really hard, because people, you know, the feeling would be that, well, yeah, but you reading cool books and writing about them or something. I've been doing this, you know, grinding crappy job or whatever. So there'd be this sort of guilt involved with it. But the other thing I also found is that I translated my work hours onto my PhD writing, and I still do that now as a researcher. I mean, this morning I got up at like 6:30, right, and I clock in to myself, if that makes sense. So I've been conditioned into it, and it's I'm not saying that, you know, when people always think, particularly when, you know, theorists and philosophers say stuff like, I've been conditioned into it, I've been socially constructed into it. People always think that they mean that in a bad way. Obviously, there are bad social constructions, and so we try to point them out. And undermine them and stuff like that. But I feel like being conditioned into that kind of rigid work routine has been of a benefit in my own research kind of thing. But it does bring out, this whole, what sort of happens to people then if things aren't automated. And I must admit, it's a challenging question for me, because there's the other part of me there's a large part of me that agrees with you. The part of me that maybe is quite sympathetic to Marx and quite, I don't know, concerned about jobs that aren't meaningful, because human beings should be able to reach their potential, whatever that is, and all that kind of stuff, and to live a meaningful life and all those sort of things. And I do see automation as a potential way to that as a technology. I wonder if, and so the whole universal basic income point is, for me, we need the political apparatus happening at the same time. And what concerns me is there is some research into universal basic income, but it's not happening as fast for me, or as quickly as the technologies around an automated workforce. And we still see this today, right? We still, particularly now, this whole kind of reaction to, work and things like that. But it's interesting that you mentioned furlough, because is that sort of like you could think about that as an accidentally experimental kind of almost universal basic income for a short period of time.
And so some of the people I've spoken to about it have been loads of really different reactions, really interesting. But I know people that have been furloughed and they are desperate to contribute, and they're really it's that they're talking about, so the organisation that they work for, things are really, really busy. Lots of their colleagues are stressed and it's difficult. It's just that their role doesn't have a position in the current climate. And they kind of just frustrated that they're not helping their pals get the work done and kind of chip in. So there's that community aspect of it. And like I talk about, and I contradict myself a lot in this stuff, because I like to explore things that I think are interesting, and then it's quite obvious I've not come to a conclusion. So although I think, we should automate away everything and give people the option not to, I definitely couldn't not work. And we've talked about this before. Like I'm a bit of a workaholic. I really, a lot of my sort of self-identity relies around what I do for a living and things like that. And actually it has a huge effect on your mental health. And worth pointing out, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. It's really important to have that sense of purpose for those people like me that really draw a sense of purpose from the work that they're doing and doing a good job and things like that.
So a couple of things that you've said, actually, one thing you've said a couple of times, which I think it would be a good thing for us to think about and talk about, might be of interest. You've said about this, I want the workforce automated away and it would be great. So you basically presented, here's the utopia, but then you've equally immediately said, I don't think that will happen. So let's actually talk about what that would look like. What would a utopian kind of automated workforce world look like, and what would a dystopian one look like?
Well, have you seen WALL-E with all the like chubby people in the hover chairs watching TV? Like,
no.
Oh, watch it. Watch like the humans in WALL-E, just really overweight in hover chairs, just watch TV all the time. That's it.
Yeah.
Utopia. No work to be done. Robots do it all.
I thought you were going to say dystopia. So I guess that opens up another part too, because so when I say dystopia, I'm thinking about institutions of power, right, and structures. Like, the dystopian side to me is obvious, right? My sort of worst fear is, well, look, we saw how the workforce were treated when they were needed, and even now, right, we see how the workforce are treated in certain warehouses and things, and sweatshops when they're needed. But imagine what people are going to be treated like when they're not needed, and you add in climate change, sort of potential population pressures, and the kind of nationalist rhetoric that we're getting at the moment, and climate disasters. You stir that all in a big pot, and it's the dystopian image is pretty scary. Like,
and look, we're so far from it as well, which is
Right.
so from my experience of delivering AI projects, people, I think because it's not sort of terribly well understood, it's a relatively new field. People don't really understand the boundaries of it, but like these tools are very, very good at the one very, very specific thing that they're supposed to do. I always laughed when there was the that story that goes around about two like AI chatbots talking to each other and they made up their own language. They had to be switched off. But it's like,
right.
It's not because they're saying stuff we don't know. It's because that's not what they were supposed to be doing. So they got switched off, like it wasn't meaningful. And it's really hard to do well. And one of the big sort of pitfalls I find in projects, and a big warning we put up when we give advice to people, is don't try and take the experts out of the loop. Do not like that. Don't try and replace the human, because it's usually incredibly difficult, expensive, risky. There's a really good example in the States. I can't remember which company it was, developed a model that was really, really good at diagnosing tumours out of CT scans, I think it was. And in fact, it was much, much better than humans at it. And instead of replacing humans for that job, actually, they have a council of like 5 doctors. But the 5th doctor is that model. So that model will present its results. And then the other 4 will sit and debate what their analysis would be and take that as a matter of opinion. And I think that's really the power of it, is let the machines do what they're good at. What can that thing do that doctors can't do? Well, it can detect stuff down to like the several pixel level. It can look at every image ever and meaningfully compare them. Masses of data, can do it at scale and things like that. Don't try and eliminate the expertise, the wisdom, the kind of the wider context knowledge, because that is really, really hard to do, and we're nowhere near there yet.
So do you think then we'll end up with kind of like those on universal basic income, and there's a huge kind of social distance between those people and then the kind of experts, right, that are needed?
I think what I really mean by like automate the workforce, I think what I really mean is, wouldn't it be good if we could get rid of all the really high risk, rubbish jobs that are just not good for health, not good for mental health, the ones that don't give people satisfaction? Wouldn't it be good if we didn't have to have people spend their lives doing them? That'd be good. I think that's a noble goal. I don't think I actually mean get rid of all work. Because that's not fully explored and it's so far off anyway. But yeah, wouldn't it be great if we could get rid of all the high risk jobs for a start? That'd be good. So people aren't at risk in their day to day, just to make enough money to live.
Yeah, and I really agree with that. I guess then the question becomes, because you said you don't think it's going to happen, right? Which kind of implies that you think the current sort of social, I guess, norm or economic incentives built around our political structure, stuff like that, means that the people that are going to get their hands on that technology aren't going to have that meaningful goal, right? So can we push and develop this technology and say that we're ethically distant from the hands that we think it's going to end up in, and pursue it as a noble goal, even though we know it's probably not gonna? Do you know what's interesting about this? This is almost like what I'm trying to frame this as, I guess, is it's almost like an analogy or mirror of developing, the A-bomb, right, or splitting the atom, right? So are those? I guess it's a repeat of that question. Are those scientists, if we think it's going to go in a bad direction, are they ethically protected? Can science be neutral, the research be neutral, even though we know it's going to maybe end up in a bad
So I think
place?
it's supposed to be, isn't it? But like the reality of the world is it isn't.
Yeah,
that's it. And why won't it happen? Well, ultimately, who gets rich off of making everyone else not poor? Well, where's the incentive to do it? And look at like people that have done really, really well. Let's like the people like Bill Gates, right, who has made huge sums of money and dedicated a vast portion of his life to philanthropy and trying to fix world causes. And yeah, he makes a significant difference. But when you look at the scale of the world and all society, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not just about like it's the scale of things, also. I guess.
It would need everyone to be on board for it to. I mean, you're talking full social like movement.
I guess I feel like I've properly got my tinfoil hat on this evening. And I can tell you why, because my friend Liam, I linked it to you afterwards. Linked me an article about one of these tech people. I can't remember his name. This is your field, but one of these tech people. That's brilliant. One of these tech people. There's it's just sort of all the contact, all the tracing apps and stuff like that. But then the thing that sort of it was a Known Me Climb article. That was it. She was talking about how the pandemic is going to be pounced upon by these kind of tech giants that are going to try and bring in, all this kind of Zoom stuff as a replacement to going to work and all those kind of things. Basically, creating sort of disembodied workplaces, where we just all work from home and stuff like that. And that's a whole different discussion I think we should have, right? If we do another episode. But the point that he kind of was talking about, the sort of tagline was that human beings are biohazards and machines aren't. And I thought that's a really terrifying narrative. I don't like it. It's like if you want to talk about this from a political theory perspective, right? One of the sort of stalwarts of political philosophy is the idea of a state of nature theory, right? To justify a kind of government, a sovereign center. You and I want to make exchanges. You and I are kind of human beings are actually quite equal in strength, even though you're probably stronger than I am, maybe.
Cheers, mate.
Like, but we need a neutral third party to make sure that when we make an exchange, you don't turn around and stab me in the back, all that kind of stuff. All sorts of problems about that theory too, which we can talk about at a different time. The idea of the state never being neutral, even to its own citizens. But it was kind of like a replay of that. So it's not like I'm afraid of people I see because I think they're going to kill me or cheat me without a kind of sovereign power which has a monopoly on violence to stop that happening. It's that human beings are a threat to each other because we're all biohazards now. And post-coronavirus, that's how we're going to be thinking. And machines won't be doing that, And I thought, well, that has a relevance to this question of automated workforce. It's you got to, they're going to work, and then I started thinking, well, I guess there's other situations where you would, why just automated workforce? Because of course, being in the army is a job, right?
Yeah.
Being a police officer is job. Are you talking about automating those kind of things as well?
Well, yeah, that's a really interesting one, because you can kind of follow that to a load of different conclusions and lots of other questions. And for example, there's a Boston Dynamics, the company that make the kind of the dog and the human robots that are really stable, really quite advanced.
Yeah, cool.
They okay, so talk about automating away jobs like police work. Well, there's one of the little dog robots marching around parks in Singapore telling people to stay away from each other.
I did see that. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And why is that the case? Well, yeah, exactly. Biohazard, it ties into all those themes that there's no risk to that machine or any human life if that thing is walking around policing the environment. So were the technology advanced enough that it could then restrain or forcibly remove people? Where is the line from, okay, it's essentially a speaker walking around telling you to do stuff, to, okay, now it's something that could stop, actually have an effect on where I am and my choice and my freedoms?
Yeah, and if we had it into the military, I guess sort of, we had a little chat before we started this podcast. One of the things you said was that maybe, I was making the point, well, an automated military would take away, war may always be a constant, but an automated military at least would take away the trauma that a soldier goes through, right? It wouldn't deal with the other side of the coin, the actual death and destruction that is caused upon, civilians or enemy who don't have a automated military or whatever, but it would reduce the suffering. So thinking of it from a pure numbers utilitarian perspective, if you can reduce the suffering, that's a moral thing to do. So it actually would seem an ethical thing to do, to create automated military in that sense. I guess, and I'm not, and again, that's interesting, and I do want to reiterate that although I've come with these kind of critical questions, I'm definitely not hostile to the idea of automated workforce and in whatever form it takes at all.
You've basically just justified robot armies. Get out. I'm the good guy again. Yes.
Well, but it also is very interesting because then it's like, why don't we just if we just got robot armies, then why don't we just simulate this
whole thing?
Because they will follow predictive patterns, I guess, until if we're so far away from them not doing that, then you could write it out in the simulation, and then I mean that just becomes so strange, it's so alien at that point. You just sort of have to stop thinking for a bit.
Yeah, but then it always falls back to, if I was dissatisfied with the outcome, do I think I could get my way taking another route?
Yeah.
By just blowing this building up. Yeah, okay, then I might.
Yeah. Do you know what it does for me too is the idea of an automated military really exposes the current way, because aren't soldiers just treated like that anyway, disposable kind of units, right? Does that, the idea of an automated military and what would justify it, if that's what would justify it, that means that what you already have is people that you're treating like automated.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that because I think the objective, and I don't know enough about the military.
I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
But I think the objective is always to win without any conflict.
Yeah,
to just project enough force, it's like having the nuclear weapons enough to stop.
Yeah, I'm sort of maybe thinking a bit more, earlier 20th century. So, it was probably very different in modern warfare. Yeah, so I think that's all quite interesting, and I guess this discussion has really just been a sort of, we picked something because we didn't want to kind of go over everything, because if we're gonna focus on particular things, like one of the things I'm really keen to talk about is data and property as a full episode, and whether or not your data can be your property, because we had a discussion about that before.
All right, here's on that theme then, a question to contemplate for next time.
Yeah.
There's this so this is a real thing. You get an AI Eurovision Song Contest, and all the music is generated by machine learning models and artificial intelligence, right? If I create a model that produces a new piece of work from scratch, who owns the copyright to that piece of work?
Yeah, excellent. So those kind of concepts. I'm really, because property rights is something I'm really interested in, because it's got such a long theoretical history, and AI and data and algorithms really problematize conventional concepts of property and make us once again go, well, what actually is property? But might need to rethink it. So that's something we might talk about for another episode. I think we can also delve a bit deeper into the sort of, for another episode, into the kind of more philosophy of mind questions about AI, about whether it's sentient, whether you're kind of just creating a sort of potential for kind of, I don't know, the deeper questions about what makes us human, and would that be distinct, and all those kind of, we could do that. I don't know if you've got any other ideas that you would think about that we would discuss.
No.
That sounds like a great podcast series. Of technological advances. Yeah, 2 episodes, mate.
No, I like the discussions around models being trained on biased data sets. So it's a big thing that's sort of talked about a lot, that you need to be careful that actually your model isn't trained on, it's not that the AI is biased, it's that the data is biased. This kind of AI, the machine learning model will find the pattern, but if the data used to build it had bias in it, you need to actually actively correct for it. That's really interesting. The whole trolley problem being codified into vehicles, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, I'd be very keen to talk about that as well. Yeah,
because it's real. I mean, that's happening.
Yeah, it's really happening. So I guess they're the kind of things that we would talk about. Again, with that tagline, I guess any kind of the ethical implications that come out of new technologies, or trying to make these discussions catch up with the technological advancements, so we don't we are a bit more conscious and thinking about the things that we, use or want to use, or think should become part of society, or what effects they're going to have, and all those kind of things. I guess it's a sort of, there's a kind of bottomless well of this stuff. So I hope that this has been kind of interesting enough that people would want to hear us talk about these kind of things again. So we're going to put this up at various different places.
I don't really care.
Well, yeah,
just call you up and talk anyway.
If we had 5 people listening, I'd still do it. I don't know. Maybe we'll continue with the video format. Maybe we'll just go completely audio.
Are we sharing this video?
I don't know.
Oh dear.
Well, no, we don't have to then. If it's just audio, I mean,
we have to now. You've said it. You ruined
we
it.
Don't. No, that was a teaser.
Edit it out. Edit it out. Edit it out.
It's a good job I'm not wearing any sort of, lame wolf t-shirts or whatever. But and I guess one of the things we were thinking about was that we don't actually have a name for this, because we just kind of jumped in and did it. So if this isn't polished enough for you as well, let us know. If we're jabbering too much, we'll practice a bit maybe before we release the next one. But as
probably not.
Said. But yeah, because we had a name. So if you've listened to this and you're interested in hearing it again, wherever we upload it, I guess we'll upload a link on Facebook at the very least for people to go and see. So just comment on it and
safe space in it.
Yeah. And I guess one other thing that we would do as well going forward is that we would link in something before, a few days or a week before we were scheduled to do a podcast. Here's an article to read. Here's the TED Talk to watch. Here's someone else's work. We're gonna basically.
It's only the pilot, and you're giving people homework.
Yeah, I've got over.
Such a teacher.
Yeah, I've got over excited. But yeah, so that's kind of.
I completely agree. I think it's a good format because it will help shape our discussion, but also it will give people an idea of what we're talking about. And one of the things I'll say as well is, if there's stuff that we do bring up that we say, oh, that's a link, or I can't quite remember it, call us out on it and we'll try and find it and probably link that to this somehow or share that with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wouldn't be like, by no means would it be absolutely necessary reading. I'm just saying that if people were interested in further, and then maybe we can open up a blog if people wanted to continue chatting about this.
Like the hover chair bit from Wally, that's something that obviously you need to see. So
yeah, right. That's what I'll have to watch then. So maybe next time we'll talk a little bit more about data and property then, because that's quite a hot topic.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you very much, Simon.
Been a pleasure. And I guess
see you on the woods.
Yeah, until next time.